everybody, I'm Natalia Bonner. Welcome back. It's Hexagons. I am having so much fun machine quilting these hexagons. I may have gotten a little bit out of control and quilted quite a few of them, but that's okay. I love sharing these designs here with you. Okay, before we hop over to the machine though, what am I quilting on? You know I'm always working on something over here. Well, today I'm working on my second version of my quilt top for my class, Let's Stitch a Figurative Quilt. So what is this class? I have a new class featuring all sorts of different figurative type designs that you're going to use on actual quilts. I know a lot of times we load a quilt on the machine, or if you're working on a domestic machine or a sit down, you might get your quilt sandwich all ready and you look at the quilt and you're scared to death. How do I quilt this? So in this class, I'm going to give you a variety of different designs, borders, background fillers, blocks, hexagons like today, and even angled stripe designs. So all of these designs can totally be applied to actual quilts that you are quilting. Now, registration is open. You can join this class on our website. When I create these classes though, I love to quilt a second variation just to inspire myself, to give me more ideas and really keep the creativity going. So as I do that, sometimes I start coming up with even more ideas. Many of the ideas that I'm going to be sharing here with you today are actually inspired from my 365-day stitch along. I've converted several of the shapes or the designs that I used on the circle shapes to use those here on hexagons. So that's something that I recommend. When it comes to machine quilting a circle and a hexagon can be treated almost the same. So look at your circles, you can treat them like hexagons, vice versa. So today we're going to give you several different ideas. Before we do get to the quilting though, there's a few things that I want to talk about. Now, obviously the panel that I'm quilting on, you can pick up one from honestfabrics.com, or if you want to piece your own, we do have the piecing workbook available on our website. The batting that we're using here today, I'm using one layer of the Quilter's Dream wool batting. I want this quilt to have a lot of texture, extra loft, so I decided to use the wool batting. Now the thread that I'm using, you're going to see here, I'm using a gray color thread. I chose to use this gray color thread throughout this whole entire quilt top. Now, my reason being, I really wanted this machine quilting to stand out. This is my own quilt. This is one that I get to keep, to have. It's just for fun for me. So I decided, you know what, let's just go for it and quilt the whole thing in gray. Now, not only does using a slightly off-color thread gray make my quilting stand out, it just creates so much more interest. It's not something I recommend on every quilt, but for me it was the perfect combination on this quilt. Everything that you'll see here today is done using my Gamble 22-inch machine, hand-guided quilting. Before you start any ruler work or join my online class, Let's Stitch a Figurative Quilt, make sure you know the basics of machine quilting with rulers. You can pick up my book, Visual Guide to Creative Straight Line Quilting. It's a great reference. In this video today, we are going to be using a few of my machine quilting rulers. We're going to use the 4-in-1, the mini 4-in-1, and the mini inside out. Let's get stitching. Hexagon number 1. I'll start out this block design by stitching in the ditch all the way around the outside of my block. Once I've stitched in the ditch around the outside, I'm going to start at any point on this block. From there, from the corner, I'll hold my mini 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler so the first marked line on that ruler intersects the first point. From there, I'm going to stitch from the point where my thread, my needle is, to the opposite side of the block. Once I get to the opposite side of the block, then I'll turn and travel, stitch along the ditch, moving up a 1/2 inch. Once I get to the 1/2 inch point, I'll adjust my mini 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler so the first marked line is right on top of my previous thread, the point where that thread intersects the outside of the block. Then I'll adjust my ruler so that I can stitch back to that point where I began stitching. I'll repeat this process, moving back and forth, moving over a 1/2 inch with each of my lines. Now, if you like your spacing like that, you could quilt it just as I have here, or if you wanted more dense, you could make your lines closer together, or if you wanted your quilting a little bit looser, you could just make your lines a little bit further apart. Hexagon number 2. For this design, I'm going to start out by stitching in the ditch all the way around the outside of my hexagon. Once I get to one of those points, then I'm going to hold my 4-in-1 mini machine quilting ruler. So the largest side of the ruler, I want my thread to intersect point to point. I'll stitch my first curve from left to right. Once I get to that side, then I'm going to travel up my ditch, moving up a 1/2 inch. At the 1/2 inch point, I'll adjust my mini 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler so the first marked line is right on top of my thread. At that point, I'll stitch an echo curve to the opposite side. At the opposite side, then I'll repeat that process, traveling up my ditch in 1/2 inch, then stitching a curved line back across the block. A fun way to add just a little bit of detail to a hexagon block. Hexagon number 3. We're going to quilt this block very similar to how we quilted number 2, but we're going to use this time the medium curve on the 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler instead of the mini, just so that you can see how different these two rulers are. So with this design, as I travel, working my way up the block, you'll see that my curve starts to get bigger than what my ruler size is. So notice as I'm stitching along, working my way up, how I'll stitch halfway across my scallop that I'm stitching through this hexagon. Then I'll stop, adjust my ruler, and stitch the second half. Hexagon number 4. This time, let's use the smallest curve on the 4-in-1 machine quilting ruler. We are going to quilt point-to-point curves. It's fun to see just the different angles that these rulers give you. So I'll start out this design by stitching in the ditch all the way around the outside of the block, then hold that ruler so that I can stitch point-to-point curves. So you're going to make sure that you're holding your ruler 1/4 inch away from where you want your thread to intersect. From there, stitch point to point. Now you will notice when I got to the top side of the hexagon, I didn't have quite enough room in my throat space, so I did just eyeball that one. Hexagon number 5. Why not turn this one into a fun little feather? So these hexagons aren't very big, but I'm going to use the outside of my hexagon as the spine and quilt a feather in towards the center. Just a fun little way to soften up this fun hexagon. Let's use that end on the inside out and the mini inside out machine quilting ruler. Where do you use that? This is the perfect example, a place like this where I want a nice point, but I don't want to have to do a bunch of marking or adjust my ruler. So I'll hold that ruler so that my thread is going to intersect where I want it to, right in those corners. I'll hold the ruler 1/4 inch away from there, stitch up to the center, stop, and then stitch back to the opposite point. I hope you all found just a little bit of inspiration from today's fun video. These hexagons are so much fun and can be so fast to quilt out. Make sure you join our new class, Let's Stitch a Figurative Quilt, on our website, peaceandquilt.com.